Joe Biden's chances of retaining the presidency are diminishing after his disastrous performance on the debate stage.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with.
So let's fill in this electoral college map to see who is expected to win the 2024 general election. First off, an overview. Donald Trump currently holds a 0.2% lead over Joe Biden in the generic ballot. However, given the miserable debate performance Joe Biden had, you can expect these numbers to go even worse for the incumbent president. Meanwhile, Biden's approval rating is at pretty much a historic low at 38%. No president has ever won re-election with these types of numbers. Well, if you look at the CNN flash poll here, 67% of debate watchers thought that Donald Trump won the debates, while only 33% thought Biden did. And when you look at some of these numbers here, 5% of voters said they changed their mind. Considering how poorly Biden did, you can expect the vast majority of those voters said that they were going to vote for Trump instead of Biden and not vice versa. So these things certainly look very bleak for Biden. But how's that going to apply on this electoral college map? Well, without further ado, let's get right into my prediction. Now let's fill in the safe states for both candidates. Starting with Donald Trump here, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana, the state of Nebraska with its at-large 1st and 3rd districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Missouri are all states that Donald Trump won by a safe margin in back in 2020, and I expect him to win by safe margins in all of those states again, along with the states of Alaska and South Carolina. While Joe Biden is predicted to win Washington, Oregon, California, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Illinois, and the state of Hawaii by a safe margin. These are all states that Joe Biden won by at least 15 points back in 2020. So that leaves Biden with 166 locked electoral votes and Donald Trump at 125 safe electoral college votes. I'm going to start off here with Donald Trump's likely states again. First off, in the state of Florida, Florida has seen a remarkable swing to the Republican Party in recent decades. What we saw in the 2022 Senate race in the state of Florida was an absolute destructive victory here for Rubio. Rubio swept essentially all of the counties in the state of Florida, while Governor Ron DeSantis did even better than Marco Rubio. You see that Miami-Dade County, a historically hugely Democratic county, voted for Rubio by 9 points. And that was also part of Trump's contribution back in 2020. In Miami-Dade County, the largest county in the state of Florida, a county with a very ginormous Cuban American population, the county swung 22 points in favor of Donald Trump in the 2020 election, despite the general environment swinging more than 2 points in favor of Joe Biden. What we're seeing in Florida is a historic trend towards the Republican Party, and essentially even the more liberal historians and prediction kind of forecasts don't expect Florida to be very competitive. Florida is likely Republican. Furthermore, Iowa and Ohio could honestly be argued as safe Republican states that Donald Trump won by 8 points despite the general environment trending towards the Democratic Party. Both of these states didn't really maneuver either way, but the trend has definitely been that Republicans are able to do very well in both of these states. You can see in Iowa, despite really Biden winning the popular vote by 4.5%, many of these rural counties trended towards the Republican Party, and again, you can see that consistent story as well in the state of Ohio, where you see essentially many of the steel workers in this part of the state, these very rural areas, heavily trending towards the Republican Party. And I do believe that both these states will go for Donald Trump by double digits in 2024, though not necessarily by safe margins. Texas as well by a likely margin. Just looking at Biden's disastrous debate performance, and the fact that really Governor Greg Abbott, who faced a relatively strong Democratic opponent, Beto O'Rourke, in that race, also won by more than 10%. Trump won the state by 6 in 2020, so I really don't expect the state to be very competitive. Especially given Biden and Trump's currently very strong polling numbers, means second as well, a district that really likes Donald Trump, it's going to vote for Trump by a likely margin. I also think at this point the state of North Carolina will be in the likely Republican characterization, just based on really Trump's really pretty powerful debate performance combined with Biden's lackluster performance. If you look at the state of North Carolina in terms of polling here, in the state of North Carolina, Joe Biden only lost the state to Donald Trump by 1.3% in 2020. The state was expected to be razor thin, and it was quite competitive, but now Trump has a 6% lead. the state has consistently been outside the margin of error for Joe Biden, so it's going to vote, in my opinion, for Donald Trump here by a likely margin. This already gives Trump every single state he won in 2020 and 3 additional electoral college votes. While for Joe Biden here, his likely states, I really don't think there's that many. New Jersey will be a likely state. Biden's not polling very well in New Jersey, but that doesn't mean he's not going to win that state. Colorado as well, I do give to likely for Joe Biden. Joe Biden's going to win the state of Colorado. It voted for Biden by 14 points, or a safe margin in 2020. New Mexico was a likely state in 2020, but it was double digits. I don't think Trump is going to flip that very Hispanic state, which is trending towards the Republican Party, but still a state I expect Biden to hold on. I also have Maine's 1st District here in the likely Democratic characterization. Though not safe, the state has heavily trended away from the Democratic Party in recent years. That brings Joe Biden to 196 on the likely and safe states, to Donald Trump at 235. Biden got only a small boost in the likely states, while Trump got a pretty substantial one. Now continuing on to fill in this electoral college map here, I'm just going to go geographically, starting with the West Coast states, starting with the state of Nevada. Nevada is a state that I expect Donald Trump to carry. If you just look at the polling in Nevada here, I'm going to display it right now. In Nevada right now, Trump has a 2.7 point lead over Joe Biden. The state is also trending towards the Republican Party in recent years, despite, again, Trump doing about 2 points worse than popular vote in 2020 compared to 2016. Trump actually improved in the state of Nevada. So again, that you'd see that improvement in a year that was much more favorable for Joe Biden. You could essentially expect that the state will continue to shift towards the Republican Party in 2024, especially given the national environment. Biden did not win the state of Nevada by a huge margin. Biden was anticipated to win the state in 2020 by about 5 points, but Biden has done significantly worse with the Hispanic vote, especially in counties like Clark County, which is 2/3 of the state's population, trended 1.4 points towards Donald Trump, and you expect an even more significant shift considering the 2022 election results. Catherine Cortez Masto essentially was the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent in any single state, and that was in the state of Nevada, where she faced a fight for her life as she won by less than 0.8% or less than 8,000 votes. While if we look at the Nevada governor's race here, Joe Lombardo was the only Republican to flip a Democratic incumbent seat, and that also happened in the state of Nevada. So Nevada has heavily trended away from the Democratic Party, and especially considering Biden's lackluster essentially results, and essentially really you can see that Joe Biden lost the debate by 34 points, essentially, according to CNN's flash poll. I really don't think that that's going to help him, obviously. The state of Nevada here right now in the lean Republican characterization, I would agree with the polling aggregate with Trump up by 2.7% over Joe Biden. I think that Trump will win by roughly that margin. We go to the state of Arizona, a dynamically opposite state of the state of Nevada. It is a state that has trended substantially over to the Democratic Party. Biden did about 4 points better than essentially Hillary Clinton did in that state, in the state of Arizona. However, if you look at the polling in Arizona, it has been lackluster for Joe Biden since the beginning of the campaign. Although this race is currently kind of within the margin of error and it has tightened a little bit over the past couple of weeks, what we saw was a lackluster performance again for Joe Biden. What we're seeing is that in the more recent polls, Trump has a significant advantage. And although Democrats did okay in the state in 2022, when we look at the fact that Katie Hobbs was able to defeat Kari Lake, an unexpected result, we look at Biden's approval rating, we look at the fact that Arizona is a more moderate state. Again, that's not the type of thing that you would want if you were in the Trump campaign. But if you look at how these moderate Republicans, they held their nose in 2020, voted for Joe Biden, thinking Trump was a really bad option. But when they look at it again, they might not vote for Donald Trump in 2024, but they're not going to back someone like Joe Biden, who they may perceive as an old man who is mentally incapable and lacks mental acuity to serve as president. Specifically in Maricopa County, about 60% of the state's population lives here, a very moderate county, a county that's like moderately conservative, but voted against Trump in 2020. You can expect that county to vote for Trump in 2024, and Biden essentially needs to win it by at least 2 to end up winning the state. I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll lose the county. And I think the state of Arizona, given Biden's lackluster debate performance, it will go for Trump right now by a lean margin. Now in the state of Georgia here, Again, Nevada, Arizona, just to clarify, I think Nevada will go for Trump by like 2.5, Arizona by about 2. In the state of Georgia here, similar phenomenon to the state of Arizona, heavily trending towards the Democratic Party. Biden did 5 points better than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. But if you look at the Georgia polls here, this has been absolutely dismal for the Democratic Party. In the state of Georgia here, Trump leads by 5.4%. The race has not been within the margin of error since the polling aggregate was released. 538's model also gives Trump a lean in the state, and it's honestly quite justified. We see is that in the 2020 election results in the state of Georgia, you saw that a more moderate Republican, Brian Kemp, who was more vocally against Donald Trump, won re-election by 7.5%. So the notion that Republicans could not win in a state like Georgia, which has trended more heavily in favor of the Democratic Party, is not completely true. Though again, right, Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, only won by 2. Brian Kemp, the Republican incumbent, won by 7.5. The state could absolutely vote for a Republican candidate. And as a result, if you're looking at Biden's incompetency and the fact that Georgia polls historically have been very accurate, I definitely would give a lean here right now towards Donald Trump in this electoral college map. Now we go to the state of Virginia, which polling has indicated to be a bit more competitive than what I previously expected. I said previously that this state will not be competitive in 2024, but if you look at some of the polling numbers here, it's honestly quite concerning for Donald Trump, quite concerning for Joe Biden. Although Trump has not led in a single poll here, Haley has, but Trump hasn't. What we're seeing is that Biden's only leading by like 1 to 2 points in some of these pollsters, despite the fact he won the state by double digits in 2020. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be this competitive like what some of the polls are suggesting right now, but the fact that this race is even remotely competitive speaks for itself. We saw that Governor Glenn Youngkin was able to win as a Republican in the state, though that doesn't really testify to much. Nevertheless, here Virginia could certainly be more competitive, although the state, you saw that Terry McAuliffe emphasized in 2021 on the abortion issue and on several other issues. What we're seeing right now is that Democrats are simply not going to be able to win by like 10 points because Trump, A, is able to do really well in the rural parts of the state, and B, I just don't think Biden's going to do very well in the suburbs given his mental acuity and essentially lackluster approval rating right now. Biden was approved of in the 2020 election. He had about a +4 approval rating. Now he has about a negative 18% approval rating. So I'm still going to give the state here to Joe Biden, but honestly, it could be a closer race than what I anticipated. Previously, I had this race as likely, now as lean. Similarly, I had Nevada and Arizona as tilt Republican. Now I have it as lean Republican. Now we go to the state of Minnesota, where Biden's polling is again not great. If you just look at the state of Minnesota here, Biden still maintains a 2.4% advantage, but that's not the type of advantage you want in a state that voted for you by 7 points in 2020. Now, Democrats have a very strong base in around the Minneapolis suburbs. For example, in Hennepin County here, we're seeing that Joe Biden got 70.5% of the vote here to Trump's 27.2%. This is by far the largest county in the state. Neighboring Ramsey County produced more than 280,000 votes in 2020. We're seeing that Joe Biden also got a similarly large margin in that county. So we see a lot of base support for the Democratic Party, and essentially the rural areas are insufficient to combat that very liberal urban vote. And I think that ultimately we're still going to see Joe Biden winning the state, but the state's going to be more competitive than 2020 for sure. Right now, I have Joe Biden winning the state by about 3 to 4 points, slightly more than the polling aggregate, but still, this is not the best numbers for Joe Biden. As a recap here, Joe Biden had 290 electoral college votes, while Donald Trump had 268. Trump only needs one more electoral college vote to essentially get a tie in the electoral college, while Joe Biden needs to pretty much sweep the board to win the presidential election. Now the 3 Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Let's first start with the state of Wisconsin. Now, in the state of Wisconsin right now, Joe Biden actually has a lead over Donald Trump by 0.2%, which is pretty impressive for Biden considering he was down by a couple points. But in 2020, the polls grossly overestimated Biden. They overestimated him by about 7.5 percentage points. And again, Trump still leads in most of the polls. If you look at the polls conducted a couple weeks ago, although they are narrow leads, Trump leads nonetheless, and considering Trump typically underperforms polls, it's certainly not a good sign for the Biden campaign. Furthermore, if you look at the 2020 election, Joe Biden only won the state by 0.63%, and sure, the state trended towards the Republicans, towards the Democrats as a whole, but if you look at some of the rural areas, which are where Trump needs to get his numbers, he did better than what he did in 2016, despite doing worse in the popular vote. However, Biden does have some good news. He did better in some of the suburban areas around Dane County, as well as Waukesha County and Ozaukee County. But ultimately, those rural areas are probably going to be sufficient for Trump to make up that 20,000 vote deficit. Furthermore, if you just look at some of the other results here, just the CNN flash poll, it was so bad for Biden, right? But Trump only needs to make up 20,000 votes in this state. And when we're saying that 5% of voters are changing their mind, 14% are reconsidering, those are not good statistics for the Biden campaign. If you look at the U.S. election map here, you see that the state of Wisconsin trended 1.4% towards Biden, but the popular vote trended 2.4 points towards President Biden, and therefore it actually kind of trended 1 point to the right, although it shifted 1.4 points to the Democratic Party. All things being considered, I definitely would right now give a slight edge to the Trump campaign, especially on that lackluster debate performance. Now, Nebraska's 2nd district, I'm just going to characterize right now for the Biden campaign as a lean district for Joe Biden. The reason, look at the trend. This district trended 9 points in favor of Biden in 2020. Biden did 7 points better than Hillary Clinton, while Trump actually lost support. The only other state besides this district that trended more towards the Democratic Party was the state of Vermont, in which essentially this isn't a fair characterization because Sanders actually got like 5% of the vote here in the state of Vermont, so it's not really a fair comparison. Essentially, this district trended heavily towards Joe Biden. This Omaha-based district voted for Biden by nearly 7 in 2020. Again, Omaha County voted for Biden by 10 points, and this district has continuously trended towards the Democratic Party, right? Don Bacon is a Republican representative in this district. He won by like 5 in 2020, and then he won by just 2 in 2022, despite the election being a more favorable year for the Republican Party as a whole. So right now, I certainly give this district to Biden, although by a relatively narrow margin. Now going to the state of Michigan here. If you were to look at the polls in Michigan, which I'm going to pull up right now, Trump has a 0.3% lead. Joe Biden actually overtook Trump for a couple days, but a couple of weeks or months ago, you saw that Trump had a relatively larger or more substantial lead, and now the race has tightened. But when we're looking at a debate poll like this, where Biden's just doing so much worse than people expected, although Biden was always expected and anticipated to lose, just this type of performance is certainly not great for Joe Biden. We look at Michigan and its high Democratic primary uncommitted votes. We look at the fact that a lot of these voters in areas like Wayne County, Ann Arbor, we see the University of Michigan, right? These young college-educated voters who are pro Palestine in the Israel-Hamas war. We look at Detroit when there's a very substantial Arab American population. 70% of those voters voted for Joe Biden in 2020. This time around, they're saying that they will either not vote or they're considering to back for Donald Trump. When we look at these type of figures here, sure, Biden won the state by 155,000 votes, but it's quite easy to make that up if Trump is able to get the rural turnout and do better in areas like Detroit, or at least just not get demolished in some of these counties here. Also, there's some anecdotal evidence here, which is generally not, the best estimation, but we're consistently seeing is that based on many voters I know who live in the state of Michigan, they're seeing much better enthusiasm for Donald Trump compared to the 2020 election, or even compared to the 2016 election, even the Democratic trending areas like Kent County, like Oakland County, and we're just generally seeing that Trump is doing much better than he was in 2020. It's probably going to be enough for him to make up a 3% deficit, and right now I have Trump winning the state by a tilt margin. Especially considering when we look at the polls here, Trump is leading, while polls generally underestimate the Republican candidate, at least Donald Trump. Now finally, we go to the state of Pennsylvania here. In the state of Pennsylvania, Joe Biden is currently, I believe, trailing Donald Trump by 0.7%, but again, these polls were pre-debate polls. After the debate, you can expect these numbers to be far worse for Joe Biden right now. Now, Biden did have the lead in like 1 or 2 polls, but Trump has consistently maintained a lead in most of these polls. The state of Pennsylvania was the tipping point state back in the 2020 presidential election. It voted for Joe Biden by about 70,000 votes, mainly because you see the Philadelphia suburbs heavily trended towards the Democratic Party. though Philadelphia County, the most urban area of the state, the most democratically leaning liberal area of the state, actually trended towards the Republican Party. So where can Trump make up this 70,000 vote deficit? Quite easily in Philadelphia County, where there have been a record registration of these Republican voters that support Donald Trump. Sure, this county is not going to vote for Trump for sure, but nevertheless, here you can expect some modest improvement from Trump and just some Democratic voters not turning out and voting for Biden because of their frustration with the incumbent, the fact that he's 81 years old and still running for re-election, the fact that he stumbled so much on the debates, the fact that there's like two international conflicts going on right now, the Israel-Hamas war and the Russian-Ukraine war. You could see that those numbers end up reflecting and hurting Joe Biden's chances of winning a re-election bid. Now, I do believe the state of Pennsylvania will be close, but right now I have to give the edge right now to Donald Trump, bring Trump to 312 electoral votes, to Joe Biden at 220 electoral college votes. Next, we go to the state of New Hampshire. So in the state of New Hampshire here, according to the polling, Joe Biden has about a 3% lead consistently over Donald Trump. That is not surprising. Donald Trump called the state a drug-infested net, and that really hindered him. He called the state that name in 2017, but since he has not really rebounded in that state, 43% of Republican primary voters backed Nikki Haley over Donald Trump in the Republican primaries. Furthermore, pretty much all of the counties in the state, except two very small and rural counties, decided to vote for Joe Biden. We're looking at the state here is that Republicans have not been able to win a statewide election except for the governor's race, which generally isn't very partisan in the New England region. Now, I'm not going to be surprised if Trump ends up somehow winning the state, but right now I have to give the edge right now to Joe Biden. By about 3 to 4 points, I believe Joe Biden will win the state by 3 to 4, not by 7 to 8 like he did in 2020, but certainly also not by like 1 to 2 or less than 1% like Hillary Clinton did in 2016. Finally, the state of Maine. I really think Maine could be the upset state of the 2024 election. In fact, that is my hot take. Right now, according to the polling, Joe Biden is doing dismally in the state. This was a state that Obama won by close to 20 points in 2008. However, if you look at the polling right now, in one poll in 2022, Biden had an 11-point lead, and pollsters generally did not conduct more polls in the state because they were like, this is a done deal, Joe Biden's going to win the state of Maine. Well, apparently not, according to more recent polls. Biden had a 1-point lead in November of 2023. In February 2024, a poll showed Donald Trump with a 6% lead, and now another poll by Digital Research shows Biden and Trump effectively in a toss-up according to some of these polls here. Now, that is very concerning for Biden, and if you look at the map.jacksonjude.com trends here, we're seeing something that's very notable. Compared to 2012, a relatively similar election in terms of the popular vote, this second congressional district trended 16 points towards Donald Trump. That is a very rural district. Up here in the second district, you can see this very red district right now. That is the district that has heavily trended away from the Democratic Party. Now, the first district has actually trended blue. But apparently the first district, I would say that is a maxed out district for the Democratic Party. If you were to look at the state of Maine, right, Portland is kind of maxed out for the Democratic Party, while the rural areas, they could become more conservative, and generally I think they will in this case. Now, Democrats are going to have a pretty strong showing in the Senate race, which could boost Biden's support, but right now, I think the state is only lean in the Democratic characterization, and Hillary Clinton nearly lost the state back in 2016, so I actually think that Trump could end up flipping the state of Maine with its at-large electoral college votes. But right now, Joe Biden at 226, Trump at 312 is my prediction. Now, in a summary here, I think that the debate has really hurt Joe Biden. The fact is, Biden did a miserable job in the debate. Like, at some moments in time, you can not even comprehend what he's talking about, and people are going to be concerned about his mental acuity. This debate was meant for Joe Biden to ease those concerns. Instead, he has drastically exacerbated and aggravated these concerns about his mental health. His campaign said he had a cold, and honestly, it is believable. His voice sounded really weird, but nevertheless here, voters are not going to take kindly this type of message. And also, Biden's just not doing very well with his approval rating, and generally his polling in the generic ballot. Democrats have not lost the popular vote since 2004, and honestly in 2024, this could be the chance for the Republican Party to retake the popular vote. Biden's doing a lot worse in red states, in blue states, and in swing states. So that is my conclusion for today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.